its originality, and most of all, because of the complexity of its characters. I can easily pump out another video for its titular character because of the Marianas Trench level of depth he has, but I decided to go a different route for now, because I got some comments asking for Titan on my Syndrome video, and I want to show you guys how much I appreciate all the support you give and quite literally read all of your comments. But more importantly, Titan piqued my interest because of how so much more unnerving he is to me as an adult compared to when I was a kid, something that only a few characters are capable of doing. How did this happen? How can a villain dressed in a white-red leotard be so terrifying? Well, for that, we have to start from the beginning. If you've watched
Okay. Maybe angels I won't be getting, because so far I have no clue what to do with them.
Рассказывал раньше. Ядра наносят урон пиростихией. Если на самом боссе в этот момент будет гидра или криостатус, да, они могут по нему вейпить и мелтить, сильно увеличивая наносимый урон. Это неплохо ускоряет прохождение в отрядах, способных это сделать. Но в итоге все сводится к ДПС-чеку в одну цель. Наличие пира вносит послабление, но количество урона все равно решает больше. Босс довольно жирный, 5 миллионов хп, правда при наличии пира персонажей в отряде можно вычитать около миллиона, который босс сам себе снесет при взрыве дендроядер. Это крайне солидный ДПС-чек, учитывая подвижность босса и часто невозможность наносить ему урон, пока он крутится. Однако он все еще требует меньше времени, если урон по половинам разделен равномерно. Минута 15, минута 20 вполне себе рабочий таймер для прохождения комнаты на 3 звезды. 12.3.1. Дикая охота. До сих пор считаю ее самым ужасным как блоком в игре. Это просто отвратительная идея, и если ее продолжат развивать, надеюсь, не будут. Тут два противника, оба работают по одному и тому же принципу. Просто первый имеет лишь 500 000 хп, а второй имеет больше 2. У них есть красная и серая полоска хп. Чтобы заполнять обе полоски одновременно, нужно закрыть резонанс над края. В таком случае пройти их быстро не составит проблем. Но если мы резонанс не закроем, то нам придется нанести примерно в 3 раза больше урона, поочередно заполняя то красную, то серую полоску, а враг в процессе еще и будет хилиться. Разница между закрытым и незакрытым как блоком настолько огромна, что это даже словами не передать. Это буквально x2, x3 по таймеру при одинаковом уроне. В целом, все еще проходится и обычным уроном, но уж слишком забавно наблюдать за тем, как премиум Невилет, без созвездий в отряде, ковыряет этот зал 2 минуты, а Флинс с Айна без инеф и без сигны и без созвездий с 3 эпиками проходит секунд за 40-50 максимум. В идеале ты...
Окей. I am going to use prototype Ember here. I am going to use this team. And like this. Probably. That makes the most sense. Right? From a jewelry shop. Oh, whatever. The video got stuck for some reason. Crit rate, crit damage.
This way, Colonel. You on this? Flash attack! Yeah.
adds up.
Let's see what you're made of.
By the frost moon of old.
This way, turn a little. Make yourselves at home. Chew on this. What?
No more lies.
Time to come clean.
Can't hide the truth. Leave this place with one heart.
Go claw. Look.
The deception ends here. The riddle.
Maybe I should have a second prototype Ember.
Forest, protect.
The Temple of Wisdom. Ding dong, water
No more lies. You poor lost lamb. By the frost moon of old. Can't hide the truth.
Look, the rainbow. Commit it to memory. Make yourselves at home.
No more lies. Lush as the moonlight. With one heart, we pray.
This way, turn a little. Chew on this.
It all adds up. Seek within.
Let's see what you're made of.
Forest, protect us for the everlasting.
Sharing my knowledge. Go claw.
How farcical. Yeah. By the frost moon of old.
Just one. Lash attack.
Can't hide the truth. Branch into song.
Chew on this.
For the everlasting forest. No more lies.
Grow, grow, grow.
You poor lost lamb.
Just one. Ding dong, water bomb. Commit it to memory.
Forest, protect us.
А для этого...
Light it up. I'm going in. Show no mercy. Lolling, it's Papa. Pyroclastic surge.
12.3.1. Дикая охота. До сих пор считаю ее самым ужасным как блоком в игре. Это просто отвратительная идея, и если ее продолжат развивать, надеюсь, не будут. Тут два противника. Оба работают по одному и тому же принципу. Просто первый имеет лишь 500 000 хп, а второй имеет больше 2. У них есть красная и серая полоска хп. Чтобы заполнять обе полоски одновременно, нужно закрыть резонанс над краем. В таком случае пройти их быстро не составит проблем. Но если мы резонанс не закроем, то нам придется нанести примерно в 3 раза больше урона, поочередно заполняя то красную, то серую полоску, а враг в процессе еще и будет хилиться. Разница между закрытым и незакрытым как блоком настолько огромна, что это даже словами не передать. Это буквально x2, x3 по таймеру при одинаковом уроне. В целом, все еще проходится и обычным уроном, но уж слишком забавно наблюдать за тем, как премиум Невилет, без созвездий в отряде, ковыряет этот зал 2 минуты, а Флинс с Айна без инеф и без сигны и без созвездий с 3 топиками, проходит секунд за 40-50 максимум. В идеале ты просто закрываешь над край резонанс в отряде, что наносит приемлемый урон, какие-нибудь 70-80 тысяч, и без проблем сносишь этот зал за минуту. Если же проходишь без резонанса, то довольно важным моментом становятся брейкпоинты. Тебе нужно сделать так, чтобы пик урона приходился на момент, когда враг только-только перешел в серую полоску. Еще тут небольшое преимущество имеют заморозки, благодаря ним враг дольше находится в этой фазе. Но без закрытия как блока, урона нужно примерно в 3 раза больше, чтобы сделать такой же таймер. И это просто неадекватно, учитывая, что в этой же половине находится краб, требующий дендра, и босс, также требующий индивидуального подхода. Это еще обсудим, подводя итоги по бездне. По этим противникам добавить мне больше нечего. 12-3-2. Два противника идут по очереди. Первым нас встретит автоматон таинственного источника. Тот, что не босс, а крипочек из открытого мира и данжа с артами. У него почти 1,5 миллиона хп и повышены все резисты, до 50%. Имеет над собой круглик. Он заполняется, если рядом есть персонажи в состоянии ночного духа. Если его заполнить, резисты спустятся до 10%. Как правило, мы не будем специально учитывать эту особенность и просто передушим уроном. Но если в отряде будут натлановцы, станет немного проще. Без натлановцев особенно хорошо себя показывает срез резистов в лице Шелонен и Аномасета. Убиваем его за 1-2 ротации и переходим к боссу. Древний Геовишап. Не ожидал увидеть в бездне босса из Мезозоя. У него 4 с небольшим миллиона хп, 50% резиста Гео и 30% резиста Крио. Большая туша, но подвижная. Урона у него также немало, однако уворачиваться не очень сложно. Особенная фаза лишь одна. Он начинает бить лазером в землю. На экране еще надпись появляется. Вот в этот момент на нас должен быть щит. Тогда босс получит урон. Если щит будет совпадать с его стихией, то есть с Крио, он получит больше урона и стан. С Крио-щитовиками в игре не густо. Лайла, Додиона, и специально брать их ради босса мы вряд ли станем. А обычный щит очень часто на нас будет и так, поскольку на поле боя часто спавнятся кристаллы. Так что байт на деда в баннере выглядит как-то неоправданно. И да, у босса есть еще один мерзейший момент. Он не получает урон первые секунд 10, если не 15, пока встает на ноги. Урон проходит, что позволяет задействовать церемонии лифовонии, но он сильно снижен. И это весьма искусственно увеличивает нам ДПС-чек. ХП у него довольно много, хотя можно обратить внимание, что босс 100-го уровня из Мезозоя имеет на лям ХП меньше, чем босс 98-го уровня из прошлого региона. Ну, вы поняли. Глобально вся эта комната один большой ДПС-чек, и пройти его можно по-разному. Каких-то действительно значимых фишек я тут не обнаружил. Окей, с залами это все, давайте рассмотрим бафы бездны и будем делать выводы. Общее благословление в этот раз такое. Когда долг жизни активного персонажа меняется, наносится ударная волна истинным уроном. Вот эти вот попукивания белыми числами. Кстати, тут не указан откат, но он есть. На глаз это срабатывает примерно раз в 2-3 секунды, что на самом деле неплохо повышает ДПС дамагеров, которые так могут. А их у нас всего 2. Это Орликина и Кларинда. Баф сделан для первой под ее баннер. Кларинде же повезло обладать схожей механикой. В первой половине имеем бонус в бутонизацию и лунную бутонизацию. Третью — бездну подряд. Причем вновь без бонусов для цветения вегетации. 200% в бутонизацию — это довольно мало и почти не чувствуется. Реализует разве что Нилу, а ей не очень хорошо в текущей бездне из-за соло-таргета. 70% в лунную уже гораздо больше, и нацелен этот бонус в основном на Нефер. Все же Лаума бьет таким типом урона лишь раз в ротацию. Во второй половине 75% бонуса для обычных атак пира уроном. И сделано это для кого? Давайте. Раз, два. Для Юэмии, все верно. Наконец-то девчонка заиграет. Спасибо разрабам за то, что не делают бонусы исключительно под баннеры и дают использовать нам старых персонажей. Что-что, ей все равно не хватает урона. Ладно, конечно, этот бонус нацелен лишь на Орликина. Прочие пиродамагеры наносят весь значимый урон другими источниками. Вообще, эта бездна очень показательно разделена на половины. Тут такое разделение по таймлайнам, я бы сказал. Первая половина — это краб, как блочащий на дендра, и дающий огромное преимущество лишь одному персонажу — Лауме. Враг, что комфортно проходится чем угодно, но если мы хотим также комфортно пройти все залы, то только лунными реакциями. И дикая охота, что без надкрая резонанса пробивается в 2-3 раза дольше, чем с ним. Такая вот классическая половина из времен надкрая. Современная бездна. И что у нас в итоге получается? По сути, чтобы пройти все 3 зала комфортно, у нас лишь одна пачка на выбор. Лунная бутонизация. Это может быть что-то подешевле, в лице Лаумы Сайна, например, но в основном разраб, конечно же, напирает на Нефер с Лаумой. Имея этих двоих, на просто сносных вложениях у тебя не будет никаких проблем с этой половиной. Беда лишь в том, что так же комфортно тут не работает ни один другой отряд. Флинн с НФ это в целом окей, но ему придется взять относительно бесполезное Дендра на краба. Отряды без резонанса тормознутся на охоте, а что-то с трудом проходит второго босса. И чтобы закрыть все одновременно, выход лишь один — лунная бутонизация. Отличная работа, разрабы, молодцы. Сможете продать этих героев. Интересно, а они в курсе, что баннер Нефер как бы закончился до начала этой бездны? Но вообще, имея хороший гир и смекалочку, все не так уж и плохо. К тому же можно проходить залы разными отрядами. Сначала берем бутоны и делаем 3 звезды на крабе. Потом собираем что-то под второй зал. Терпим на крабе минут 5, но проходим второй. А на дикую охоту берем любого надкрайца Сайна, и уже неплохой таймер получается. Ну а если их нет, то берем как можно больше дэмэджа. Если же урона много, то передамажить так или иначе можно любой зал. Обычно мы тогда собираем пачку под второй, а краба и охоту проходим голым уроном. Таким образом будет работать что угодно на хороших инвестициях. А самым лучшим отрядом, какой-нибудь Скирк или Мавуики, хватит и стандартов. Вторая половина же как будто противопоставляет себя первой. У нас тут кучка толстых мобов, босс из Фонтейна, самый не как блочный босс из Натлана и босс из, прости господи, Льюи. Все, что тут нужно, это пирогерой, чтобы сломать щиты Капелиусу и лопнуть ядра Скуфу. И то даже он тут не обязателен. Тут просто нужен урон, просто сильные отряды в том самом вакууме. И в целом это действительно пройдется чем угодно, что способно такой урон нанести. Можно обратить внимание, что во второй половине у противников гораздо больше хп, чем в первой, но при этом первая проходится дольше, если у тебя нет Нефер с Лаумой, конечно же. Все дело в как блоках, стадиях неуязвимости и тройных полосах хп. Что насчет преимуществ, то очевидно это Арлекина. Пирогерой утилизирует бонус, сама по себе весьма сильная. По сути, разраб говорит тебе взять Нефер с Лаумой в первую половину, а Арлекина в любой из ее концепций во вторую. И тогда да, проблем не будет. Но помимо Арлекина, во второй в целом будет работать что угодно, если оно наносит хороший дэмэдж. И тут не потребуется такой огромный гиперинвест, чтобы закрыть краба без дендра или охоту без резонанса в адекватный таймер. Что в итоге по этой бездне? Вторая половина — норм. Тут как в старые добрые. Чем отряд сильнее сам по себе, тем он тут лучше. Первая половина — это мрак, отражающий весь ужас надкраевских как блоков, где 3 зала вместе, по сути, оставляют лишь один комфортный отряд, в игре, где более 100 персонажей. Сложнее или проще? Ну, для тех, у кого есть Нефер или хотя бы просто Лаума, проще. В прошлой бездне они шли в первую половину, а во второй у многих возникали проблемы с охотой. Тут их можно поставить в первую и без особых проблем пройти все залы, в то время как во вторую просто взять лучшую пачку на аккаунте, ибо как блоков почти что нет. И судя по фидбэку в моей телеге, таких большинство. И они, походу, даже не понимают, что происходит. Многие писали, что бездна вообще изи. Спрашиваешь, чем проходил, и в 90% случаев видишь Нефер с Лаумой в первой половине. В оставшихся 10% видишь C2 плюс героев и челов по типу «Прошел пачкой Флинн с Нефа с Инсю Нахида без каких-либо проблем, вообще не вижу байта». Ну да, ты точно так же закрыл резонанс. Еще и в уроне отряда пришлось потерять из-за Нахиды на крабе. Отряд дамажит 1060 в секунду, но проходит легко. Об этом, блин, и речь. Реально, очень много людей даже не видят проблемы, поскольку они и не пытались пройти ту же охоту без надкрая или овергира. Просто попробуйте, и вы сами все поймете. Заслуженно отмечу, что перепрохождение разными пачками все еще может помочь. Это реально самый важный, самый ключевой совет для тех, у кого не получается пройти на все звезды. Пробуйте разные отряды в каждый отдельно взятый зал. Тут это как никогда актуально. Третья комната, кстати, нифига не проще второй из прошлой бездны. Да, сама охота стала проще. Вместо 2 жирных врагов тут 1 жирный и 1 поменьше. Но я напомню, что там в первой половине был лишь Гидровишап, что улетал за 40 секунд от дефолтной бутонной пачки. Геовишап и Автоматон за 40 секунд не отлетают. 15 из них босс будет только вставать. Так что общий ДПС чек тут, если не выше, то как минимум такой же. Сделать тут 7-20 без закрытия на край резонанса, вполне себе хороший результат, скажу я вам. Хотелось бы больше залов наподобие второй половины, но я уверен, что все будет скатываться в то, что мы имеем в первой. Тут нас спасли лишь баннеры Арлекина и Деда, под них конкретно придумать что-то довольно сложно. И вообще, это же реально надо постараться сделать целую половину так, чтобы из сотни героев у нас остался буквально один рабочий отряд, что завязано на наличии одного-двух персонажей. Такое я решительно осуждаю. Спасибо за просмотр. Надеюсь, было полезно или хотя бы интересно. Пиши, какими пачками проходил эту бездну, да и мысли по ней в целом. Будет интересно почитать. Напоминаю о возможности подписаться на канал, поставить лайк и отправить видео другу, у которого есть проблемы с бездной. В Телеграме проходят розыгрыши лун, на Твиче ее можно забрать бесплатно за баллы канала, а на Бусти ролики выходят на один день раньше. Я желаю тебе больших чисел и еще услышимся.
I better wrap this up. You poor No more lies.
Look, the rainbow.
It all adds up.
It all falls into place.
Yeah.
Hello. Today we're going to talk about
Bring it! Let's light it up! Rise with the sun!
Teamwork is dreamwork! Get to work! Suffer the wrath of Eatley!
Light of the blazing sun! Incinerate!
Everybody stand! Fulfill our pact! Eat Laline! Eat Papa! Get him!
Pyroclastic surge! Full throttle! Letting brave names echo!
Off we go! Let's light it up! Yeah! Teamwork is dreamwork! Show no mercy! You two! Time to end them!
Light of the blazing sun! Incinerate! Incinerate! Rev the engines!
Chew on this. I wanna.
Titan terrified me. Far more than any villain monologuing how they'll destroy the planet. Far more than any villain that brutally terminates their victims on screen.
My turn a little.
Far more than any villain that is designed to be terrifying. I don't know how, but Titan circumvents all logic and rationality, as I've never expected Jonah Hill to be such an effective antagonist, a villain capable of truly scaring me to the core. Do you want to know what's even scarier? Megamind released 15 years ago.
I saw.
Yeah, that shit got me shivering my timbers. So yeah, Megamind is such an amazing movie. It was a movie that initially got flack when it first released, but is now widely praised for its humor, its originality, and most of all, because of the complexity of its characters. I can easily pump out another video for its titular character because of the Marianas Trench level of depth he has, but I decided to go a different route for now. Because I got some comments asking for Titan on my Syndrome video, and I want to show you guys how much I appreciate all the support you give and quite literally read all of your comments. But more importantly, Titan piqued my interest because of how so much more unnerving he is to me as an adult compared to when I was a kid, something that only a few characters are capable of doing. How did this happen? How can a villain dressed in a white-red leotard be so terrifying? Well, for that, we have to start from the beginning. If you've watched Megamind, you already know the rivalry between the protagonist and the hero. You know the age-old dance between Megamind and Metroman, the two stars of the whole film. Their battles are well known, written in records so much that there are actual scholars that have them down to a science. For the public, however, their spectacles are broadcasted through the voice of a single reporter, Roxanne, tasked to break down the stories of their encounters, and in front of her, a silent man holds a camera to capture every moment. That man is Hal Stewart. Hal looks
Okay, I'm really annoyed by all of what is happening currently. You have everything you need. What about you? Everything is level 20 plus. Or actually just level 20. So you are as good as you can be, except of course
looks like your stereotypical dorky loser. He's short, freckled, and not in great shape. an NPC you'll harass in Rockstar's Bully. He wore geeky t-shirts, obviously plays video game after work with a controller on one hand and a pizza slice on the other, which by the way is not something I inherently deem as negative because I'm basically describing myself. To me, he looks like one of those wimpy side characters you'd see in old 2000s films where their story arc is that they get the girl in the end by being true to their dorky selves. In this story, Hal pines for Roxanne, the reporter, the main damsel in distress, setting himself up as the underdog like in those stories. And it seemed in the beginning, Hal was just that type of character, with one glaring difference. You see, most dorky characters with a positive character development are the shy, timid type, admiring their romantic interest from a distance until they're called to action and be forced to interact with them, no matter how awkward they are. In Hal's case, however, it seems that he's gone past being shy. He's weirdly open to talking to Roxanne about his interest towards her, albeit in roundabout and rambling ways. He isn't shy. However, he is still an awkward, bumbling loser that stumbles all over his words whenever he tries to communicate with his love interest. And this has been going on for a while. As Roxanne said, they have been partners in the news agency for how many years? From this, we can infer that Hal has had this interest towards Roxanne for a long time, though I'm not sure if he was shy about them at first or he was never embarrassed by it to begin with. For most people, this seems harmless. I mean, come on, the guy looks like one bad wedgie away from meeting God. His design tells us that he is no threat. His lifestyle affirms us even more. You see, after a while, Minion pulled up information regarding Hal. We get to know that he is 28 years old with nothing outstanding to his name, no records, no achievements, and all of that is reflected by the way he lives. In a small apartment with a pull-up bed, a kitchen where laundry is hung, food containers everywhere, and on his wall is a poster of Roxanne overlooking him where he lays down. The life of this man seems barren. Nothing in his room can tell us about Hal's goals or ambition. Well, other than his romantic endeavor. And you may think that maybe his personality is his redeeming factor. For some, maybe it is some sort of charm and somehow relatable. And I advise you to probably take a good hard look in the mirror, because if you see this man as anything but the quintessential nice guy, then I have some bad news for you. Hal is nice in the most technical of definitions. He never outright says anything rude, especially to Roxanne. In fact, Hal puts Roxanne on a pedestal, masking his own opinions to match hers, complimenting her every time he gets the chance to. He is extremely nice to her, and therein lies what made Hal so scary. You see, every time he talked to Roxanne, it wasn't him per se. It was a forced caricature of a person with genuine kindness, holding back his true self just enough to parade as a good guy. He never was rude towards Roxanne, but he was creepily pushy, especially in that scene where he invited her to a quote-unquote party to his house, which, by the way, is just the two of them. He also overcompensated by ordering a bounce house and even hired wedding photographers, just in case. If your alarm isn't blaring telling you that this person is anything but nice, then this is an intervention. The main red flag, though, wasn't that. It wasn't the weird invitations or the concerning delusions, but rather it was his reaction towards rejection, his fear towards the word no. I would assume that Roxanne has declined most of his offers, but I wouldn't be surprised if she said yes to some of them, as Hal isn't really the best at hiding his outbursts towards rejection. This was demonstrated to us when he crashed out behind the van, berating himself and ultimately punching the vehicle, to which he hurt his hand, and blamed it on the van before storming off. Anger is scary to watch, but something about taking it out on yourself is a type of threat that is caged in glass. Because we know Hal is practically harmless, even in masked anger. So what happens if this man is given the powers of a god. In stories, there is something we call the lie, coined by K.M. Wayland. She says, the lie the character believes is a mistaken or limited perspective the character holds at the beginning of the story, which will be challenged as they go through the plot. Through this challenge, this lie will undergo multiple processes and external forces in which their characters can change for either the better or for worse. For example, in the movie, Megamind's lie is quite blatant. It's the fact that his ultimate goal was to be the baddest, to defeat Metroman, and all throughout the film, we get to see the ramification and the consequence of holding on to that lie, forcing Megamind to find his truth, that he is destined to be greater, a positive character arc. Hal, on the other hand, had a simpler lie that he forced himself to believe in, is that he is the main character of the story, and that he is destined to get the girl. The dangerous thing about Hal's crush towards Roxanne is that at no point in the movie did he lose the belief that they are meant to be, that though he is incompetent, somehow only he has the right to be with her. And what made this dangerous is that instead of having this lie challenged, it was further empowered. In his endeavor to fight a hero again, Megamind played God, and by accident turned Hal into one. Through Metroman's genes, Megamind synthesized a serum that gives anyone Metroman's power and physique. He was in the midst of choosing someone who is similar to Metroman, brave, strong, with a sense of justice, but as fate would have it, this did not come to pass. Instead, they got Hal. They got Titan. This serum transformed him. His physique changed from Jonah Hill to Channing Tatum. He also gained the powers of Metroman, such as strength, speed, flight, and laser eyes. Megamind has successfully made his rival. However, he only made the physical aspect of him. What he wasn't aware of was that he didn't inject Hal with bravery and justice. He injected him with an even stronger lie. That he, of all people, is a hero. And as they say, the good guy always gets the girl. With this lie of being the good guy reinforced, Hal was trained by Megamind on how to fight evil and such. However, it was not how he expected it to go. Even in training, Titan was ruthless, careless. He didn't care about the safety of the environment or the people around him. In his mind, the only true way for justice was violence. So much so that Megamind doubted if they got the right person. I think it's a nice touch that Megamind, through his countless encounters with Metroman, a paragon, believed that anyone who is given such great powers would inherently use them for good, that they will use it for justice. It was a wake-up call for him that Hal's only goal with this power is to get Roxanne, to save her and claim his destiny. And this is what he does. Even before his big debut, even before he was ready, Titan flew over to Roxanne, showing off the powers he has, and because of this power, Roxanne couldn't push back like she always does. Titan's lie was at its strongest at this point. He couldn't wait to unmask, both literally and metaphorically. He believed that the only thing keeping him and Roxanne apart was the fact that Hal wasn't like Metroman. And now that he is, he will definitely get the girl this time. A lie so strong that he believes that they are already together. Unfortunately for him, it was just that. A lie. A delusion that was not challenged and allowed to go rampant. He believed himself to be the good guy, and the good guy gets the girl, right? So what happens to a character when that lie that gave him control and power finally breaks and rejects him? I love the parallel between Megamind and Titan when they both faced rejection, when their lie crumbles and were faced with the truth. Both returned to their roots, to who they really are, dropping their facade as someone good. But where Megamind was inherently good all along, Hal was a different story. Upon facing the truth that powers don't automatically make you achieve your goal, Hal dropped the good guy act, adopting Titan as his main personality. He lost all his ambition to do good. Instead of opting to use his powers to fight evil, he committed evil, which ticked off Megamind, saying that he should have stepped up to become the hero. But Titan thought it was boring, and his only reward for doing good has rejected him, squandering the chance for justice in chase of personal gain. Titan didn't even bother to show up to fight Megamind. Instead, he just lazed about his apartment and played video games. Megamind was obviously pissed, but being the veteran villain, he knew exactly which buttons to push to get Titan to bring him to justice. Or so he thought. After rage-baiting Titan spectacularly, the two duked it out, rekindling Megamind's spark for battle and reliving his days fighting Metroman. But something was off. Titan was even more brutal than before. His punches packed a wallop, and there wasn't even any playful banter, only pure rage from the side of Titan. When the hero finally got the villain down to his knees, Megamind expected Titan to just throw him in jail. But this wasn't Titan's idea of justice. He had something else in mind, to exact his revenge on the man that stole his gold. This is what made me terrified of Titan. A villain fueled by pettiness and selfish desires, driven by delusion. He is a villain that is all too real. We all know the type. The creepy simp that believes themselves to be the victim, that no girl will ever get with the nice guy. The type that never takes no for an answer, that gets violent with rejection and never takes accountability, and who is deep down a big coward. If you're a person that is unfortunate enough to encounter such a character, then you know the dangerous lengths they can go to, the threat they become when they gain access to a small bit of power. That is Titan, a simp too enveloped in his own delusions. He is such an accurate representation of that type of character, something you'd believe will happen if someone in the real world ever gains superpowers. Actually, you don't even have to imagine it. Just think about the countless horror stories people have about this exact type of delusion and the power they held against them. And the violence and destruction Titan brought about Metro City just reminded me of that type of person. Now that he is unchecked and unchained, he has come to grips with the truth Roxanne gave him. And instead of using this for a positive character arc, he lashed out and chose to harm her instead. The traditional nice guy sign-off. Normally I'd praise the hell out of this type of villainy, how deliciously evil it is, but I didn't feel that way when watching Titan. All I felt was genuine horror and disgust. Because all throughout the film, Hal was an unlikable piece of shit. For his type of character, you'd believe that he was somewhat smart and sweet, but no. He is a dork, but he was a complete idiot. He was never sweet, just masquerading as a sweet person. He was cowardly, pushy, creepy, and insecure. Everything that was unjustly enabled when he was given powers. And that is a point for Megamind's writing team. Because if it was only him as the villain, then I wouldn't have enjoyed the film half as much. It's a good thing we have an actual fun villain to balance Titan out, a foil that made both of them shine. It was also what made his defeat so cathartic, sapping everything that enabled him and reducing him back to the loser he was. I love that he cowered in the face of Metroman, that when his absolute power is challenged, he reverts back to the same cretin of a man he truly is. In the end, Titan was just that. An unlikable character to begin with, enabled by the powers he didn't deserve. A villain that is far too real and far too terrifying.
Teamwork is dreamwork! Laline, it's Papa! Wrath from the skies! Incinerate! Incinerate! Bring it! Let the mountain's veins boil! Huh? Yeah! Show no mercy! You two! Time to end them! Everybody stand! Light up the blazing sun! Incinerate!
How should I do this?
In these troubled times of climate catastrophe, billionaires consuming all the wealth and resources on the planet,
Okay, so as promised in my last video, we're going to talk about Goddess Fall.
Let's not. Okay, maybe let's... The metal burst damage does make sense.
Chew on this. Yeah. Commit it to memory. Make yourselves at home.
Okay.
Grow. The Temple of Wisdom. You're blind. Being done. Enough.
Oh, come on.
Forest, protect.
This might hurt a little. Go claw. I wanna. Chew on this. Make yourselves at home.
Fucking great.
Go claw. Committed to memory. Sharing my knowledge. You're blind. Lash it.
What a joke!
Leave this place for the everlasting. Can't hide the truth. It all adds up.
The Temple of Wisdom. Look, a rainbow!
Let's see what you're made of.
No more lies.
Let's see what you're made of.
Forest, protect us. By the frost moon of old.
This may hurt a little. Make yourselves at home. Chew on this. What?
Can't hide the truth.
Let's see what you're made of.
Sharing my knowledge. Don't claw.
No more lies. I saw this.
Bitch. Maybe I want Barbara. Okay, maybe I should just push through.
The minds of the spiders in your house.
Emotions are like a raging.
Good luck! Committed to memory. Ouchie. Let's change tactics. The temple of
Hello,
wisdom.
YouTube.
Lash attack!
For the everlasting forest. A grave to bleed. Can't hide the truth.
Have you ever wondered what it would be like to be a spider, or questioned how intelligent they were?
No more lies.
It's obviously not an easy thing to determine. Philosophers have argued forever about whether we can even know if anyone besides ourselves really exists and experiences the world. But we can look for certain indicators that there might be something going on in their little brains. When we do this, we're really looking at something called
Can't hide the
cognition.
truth.
To understand this, I spoke to two researchers who have done work in this field, Dr. Jimena Nelson at the University of Canterbury in Christchurch, New Zealand, and Dr. Massimo D'Agro at the University of Trento in Italy. And when I went back and reviewed those two interviews, it became really clear that I was in murky water the moment I set out to do this.
Yes, I think you really you didn't do yourself a favor wanting to do cognition. Cognition is a big word.
It's it is really
big topic, and people inside the topic don't agree on what it is.
There's a lot of scope. I mean, I'm particularly interested in cognition, and I tend to study vision, although I'm interested in all sensory systems, really.
Right.
But my interest is in how sensory systems inform cognition, essentially.
Just so we have somewhere to start, one definition of cognition is adaptive information processing in the broadest sense, from gathering information through the senses to making decisions and performing functionally appropriate actions, regardless of the complexity of any internal representational processes that behavior might imply. So we're kind of talking about what might be going on in a spider's head, if anything at all, because for a long time, we didn't think there was much. Was spider cognition just not recognized at all? Was there kind of a belief that it just didn't exist, or what was the belief on that?
Yeah, I would say actually that for the general public it still is that. Very much so. Spiders are little robots. They're just little automatons, Cartesian kind of mind and matter duality, whatever you want to call it. The spiders just don't have any kind of processing, which actually, if you stop to think about it, it makes no sense at all, because of course they're processing, censoring information, they're making decisions about what to attack, what to escape from. So everything is processing at some level. But it just doesn't really enter our consciousness to consider something that small, really, to have kind of processing powers that might actually be a little bit surprising in terms of the level of decisions and the level of information that is being essentially used to make those decisions. We might now, we know a lot more about bees and whatever, and there's lots of documentaries about bees, and so maybe we might attribute bees to having some kind of interesting behaviors, which of course they do.
Right.
But we still don't do it to spiders by and large, for sure. We don't. And 30 years ago, scientists wouldn't have either.
Jumping spiders were the first spiders to give us a hint that there might be something more than a reflex or programmed responses going on. And this may make you wonder, are they intelligent? Turns out, that's a more complicated question than we might think.
Intelligence in biology is kind of a weird term to use, because in biology, when we talk about intelligence, we talk about the ability to solve survival problems. And in that sense, every animal is intelligent because every animal is perfectly adapted to its environment.
Okay.
When we use the term colloquially, we kind of mean clever, I think. We kind of think about this ability to think over your thinking sometimes, which is in psychology is called metacognition.
When scientists started looking closely at spiders, they started to see some behaviors that looked pretty clever, which seemed unthinkable, given that they're an animal with a brain the size of a poppy seed. And that might be a good place to start. What do you think is the significance of brain size, if there's any at all?
How much in depth should I go with this answer? I think we can talk for hours about this. The answer is complicated. You know, I'll go and you stop me. Fair?
Okay, let's shoot for like a 2-minute answer, maybe.
Yes. It is true that there has been a history about trying to correlate brain size with cognitive capabilities. And this is because at the start of our research on cognition, we had this problem in our faces, right? You know, we are humans, we talk to each other and we build civilizations. So we clearly have something going on. And of course, this has been attached also to kind of a sense of self-importance of the human race. We are the one that ask the questions, and we are the one that want to find the answer. And it's much better to tell yourself that you are special in some way, rather than telling yourself that you are not special in some way.
Right.
But I want to be fair that there is something real about brain size correlate with cognition. And I think, especially in some of its measures, you know, the overall brain size probably not particularly important. It's more about the brain-to-body ratio or the encephalization quotient, because when you get to the extremes, very big animals or very small animals, the brain size is all over the place. And also when we test a cognitive ability on an animal, the fact that it fails in the task, it does not necessarily mean that the animal is not capable of solving the task. It may mean that it can't solve the task, but it may mean that we didn't ask the question properly.
So, generally speaking, there does seem to be something to brain size, or the brain-to-body size ratio. But this isn't always the case.
But it kind of goes out of the window the moment we get out of... and especially in invertebrates, in arthropods, in insects and spiders, because there, evolution had to work with some constraints. Arthropods can't grow in size over a certain limit, and that's a physical limitation. At some point, a hollow tube, which is what an exoskeleton is, can sustain its own weight.
Right.
It needs to be solid. So if you can't grow, then you have to work with the space you have for your brain. and you still have to solve complex problems. In a constrained situation where you can't grow your brain, you will make your brain more efficient. And so make better circuits, make more clever circuits that have to solve the same problem, but with a lower number of neurons.
And this is what they refer to as the economy of design idea.
Yes, this is what they refer to the economy of designing here. So you have to solve the problem with less neurons.
The economy of design hypothesis can involve having sensory systems that filter out unnecessary information, or that convert information more efficiently. We can see this in jumping spiders. When a jumping spider sees a moving object with its lateral eyes, it usually turns to face it. But if we put the spider on a treadmill, so it can't actually turn, it turns the treadmill the correct amount, even though the mark doesn't arrive in front of it. So rather than creating a feedback loop with the brain saying, keep turning until the mark is in front of your main eyes, which requires constant updating and a lot of processing, the lateral eyes are sending the information directly to the legs, saying, turn this amount, which is more efficient and requires less processing power. Dr. Nelson observed a vivid example of this while studying a jumping spider that seemed to be extremely choosy in what it hunted and ate. And what species was that?
We call them MTs, the mosquito terminators. It's called the Varca calicivora, so calicivora means eating mosquitoes. And it specialized on eating Anopheles mosquitoes, the vectors of malaria. But it also specialized on eating female Anopheles mosquitoes as opposed to male Anopheles mosquitoes, and specifically blood-fed female Anopheles mosquitoes, making it the pickiest animal on Earth. And it could tell the difference, and I did a whole bunch of 3D animation work to see how it's discriminating. And it was discriminating based on all sorts of things, but including like how feathery the antennae were. So females have got less feathery antennae than males, and so even if you gave it a skinny, not blood-fed female Anopheles, it preferred the skinny Anopheles to a male Anopheles, and it could tell the difference, which is kind of hard to even put the human on. It could tell the difference based on how feathery the antenna or fluffy the antenna were. And, you know, so it's making these phenomenal discriminations. I mean, first of all, it tells you a lot about the visual resolution that they've got, because obviously with animation, there's no smell, there's no other thing, right? It's just it's 3D animation, so it's visual. And it was really clear cut, like it was really, really clear cut. And they could do this from when they emerged from the egg sac. So they're 1.5 millimeters long, these spiders. So obviously, if this tiny little baby spider is, you know, if it's processing the whole gestalt or, you know, the whole mosquito at the same time and the mosquito's moving or whatever, you know, there's a lot going on there. So what I found with this 3D
just realize I can just use this tune, except like something like where's the Nepha? She gives a lot of shield and deals some decent damage. So maybe that's going to be enough.
The animation is that they're actually taking shortcuts. So they're actually essentially just going, okay, so is it Anopheles or not Anopheles, for example? Because they're not interested in other mosquitoes. And Anopheles have a resting posture that's slightly kind of on an angle to the substrate, whereas most of the mosquitoes are kind of parallel. So the first thing they do is look at angles. If it's the right angle, okay, that's good. So check everything else out. And then, of course, I've got to work out whether it's a male or a female, whether it's blood-fed or not blood-fed. And they're looking at shapes of blood-fed because the female's round and gorged. And then they're working out whether or not it's a male or female, and it's specifically the antenna. So I was, for example, in my virtual mosquitoes, I was just swapping antenna from the body of a male to the body of a female. They were very accurate bodies. female had the male antenna, they went to the other one, right? So they were looking at the antenna. So they were just using shortcuts to be able to work out, okay, yes, no, kind of almost binary questions.
Right.
Might help them solve actually what ends up being a very difficult problem. So using these shortcuts, they're able to essentially fast track, if you like, the decision. To take that example to an extreme, we continued working with Avarka Laura, and this time, instead of doing the 3D animation, realistic 3D animation stuff, we boiled it down to really abstract stimuli, which are essentially line drawings. And we had a line drawing of an Anopheles, a realistic drawing of a fly, which is like really uninteresting, a circle, and then literally stick figures of Anopheles. And then a fat stick or a fat oval with
Show no mercy
for a blood-fed female. And they went for the blood-fed female stick figure, which was literally an oval with 3 sticks over every other possible thing, including a very realistic drawing of a fly. And they hacked the stick figure and were really good. And it looked nothing to our eye, it looked nothing like an Anopheles. So then we essentially took the sticks away from the oval, and from the thin Anopheles, it was just sticks, and we basically just separated them and had them with a gap to see whether or not they had to process things holistically, like a gestalt, or if they were just looking at elements, and if the elements had a certain configuration that was equal to the correct prey. We kept them in the same configuration that they would be in nature, so in other words, the oval was in that kind of orientation. It doesn't really matter what orientation the oval is, because they can always be seen in an Anopheles side of a leaf. But the relative position of the abdomen with the legs, for example, is always going to be like that. Right. So we that position, or we broke that position. And we found that they responded equally to a nice line drawing of an Anopheles, blood-fed female Anopheles mosquito, to the correct configuration but broken of the elements. And when you disjointed the angles, the relative angles, it will go to pieces. Here, they have really pared down a difficult decision by filtering out anything that's irrelevant. It's just the relative angles of a fat abdomen and its legs. And it doesn't even matter if they're attached. Right?
That's the funniest part. It can.
Well, it kind of makes some sense. There could be a leaf, for example. Because if our visual system does the same thing. As I say to my students, like if we saw a tiger behind a picket fence and we couldn't recognize that it was a tiger behind a picket fence, we'd be dead, right? Because it's not slices of tiger that we're seeing, right? We're seeing one tiger, and that's exactly what they're doing. At the end of the day, that's exactly what they're doing.
There's another curious shortcut that jumping spider brains seem to take, and it's one that our brains take too. Look at this cloud of dots. It's not hard to see the general shape of a spider in this. Now look at this cloud and watch how it moves. This just looks like a mess of random dots. There's nothing recognizable in this. But look at this one. There's something funny about this cloud of dots and the way it moves. It doesn't look like any creature we're familiar with, but something about it looks alive. This is because of something called biological motion. The bodies of most creatures are made up of interconnected joints, and when those creatures move, the positions of the joints obviously move, but their distances to each other remain the same. In these dot clouds, the dots correspond to joints. So even if we take the parts of a spider, scramble them, make them move, as long as we keep the distances between the joints on each limb constant, it still registers in our minds as something lifelike.
The idea there is that even if you remove shapes, your brain can still see something. It can see the imaginary connection between the dots. But even if it can't see the connection between the dots, like imagine the connection between the dots, the dynamic of motion, it's specific of things that are alive.
Rise with the sun.
That's what it meant with biological motion. All living things move in a certain way. There is a dynamic that is specific to living things. And our brains have evolved to see some motion even if we don't see the shape and understand that that's something alive.
I don't know if you were ever a Star Wars fan.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so I'm just thinking, you know, if you imagine something like a car driving past in front of you, to the average person, that clearly registers as something relatively inanimate, right? It does not look like something that's alive. It's just one shape that's kind of rolling past. However, when you look at an AT-AT walker, which has exactly those connected joints,
it kind of looks alive.
It kind of looks like something alive, and this is probably exactly why.
Yes.
You may think that an AT-AT only looks alive because it's sort of shaped like a horse or other four-legged animal that we recognize. But the AT-ST looks sort of alive too, even though it's not really shaped like any animal we're familiar with. It moves with biological motion. And Dr. D'Agro found that jumping spiders can tell the difference between biological motion and random motion.
And we saw that this jumping spider respond differently to these dot clouds that move like a spider, so biologically, and some dot clouds that move randomly, so the dots just scattered around. The scrambled one is quite special. So in the normal spider, let's say, there is this kind of motion. And so even if you move this point and move at another point, at another place, the motion is still the same.
Yeah.
The structure is lost. You can't connect the dot anymore in your mind. But the dynamic is maintained.
Right.
So you still feel that there is something alive, even if you can't really make out what it is. The spiders can't tell apart the scrambled from the biological. But they treat these two together similarly and differently from the random one.
Right.
So it really seems that it's about this liveliness, this perception of seeing something else.
One more element of this is that jumping spider eyes don't all do the same thing. These eyes on the side here, the posterior lateral eyes, seem specialized in detecting motion, but they don't really classify it. They just alert the spider that something is there. These forward-facing eyes on the sides of the head are probably the most versatile. They see a bit more detail, and these are the ones that discriminate between biological motion and random motion. They're also most likely the primary rangefinders that the spider uses to target jumps, as their fields of view overlap to provide a good zone of binocular vision. These large eyes, the primary eyes, have a very narrow field of view but see in fantastic detail and can scan back and forth and are used for target identification. So this is one more way in which the jumping spider makes its brain more efficient. By spreading the load and dividing the labor, splitting up all of these different tasks between different sets of eyes that each act as a kind of filter, it's able to do more with less. This is a really cool discovery, but at this point you've been here for probably 10 minutes. You're clearly invested, so if you could take a second and hit the like button real quick. I know I often forget to do that when I'm absorbed in videos, but it helps out huge. I don't think you even need to pause. Thanks. Moving on. So far, we've talked mostly about sight and jumping spiders. The truth is, that's where most of our study on spider cognition has been done, but that raises another question. If vision can support this kind of cognition in spiders, might their other senses do that too? In contrast to jumping spiders, most spiders have very poor vision, but they have other senses that we don't have, and probably don't fully understand. They have receptors on their legs for chemoreception, which is something like smell or taste. They have structures called slit sensili on their exoskeletons that allow them to feel vibrations through the ground that are imperceptible to us. And they have sensory hairs called trichobothria, which can sense an air current moving as slowly as 1 millimeter per second, about the speed of the tip of the second hand on a wristwatch, enabling something like hearing, being able to sense motion at a distance. We have very little understanding of what kind of cognitive processing they might be doing with information from those sensory systems. Is there perhaps an analog to biological motion in the world of vibrations that spiders can sense through the ground? Or are there other aspects of their sensory system that we haven't really considered? Has there been much research done on the relationship between those senses and cognition? Like, it seems like there's been quite a bit done on visual systems and cognition, but what about these other ones?
No, very little. I mean, with the tactile hairs, for example, most of the research on tactile hairs has not been done on jumping spiders, it's been done on Cupianeus. And their work is very physiological, so they're really looking at proximate mechanisms and not really linking that up to cognition. And then there's other ones that have done stuff on web spiders, actually, sort of in that sense, the relationship between how much information the spider can glean from the web, viewing the web as an extension of the sensory system.
In 2021, Jian Zhu and a team in New York explored how orb weaving spiders use their webs as much more than just a net to catch prey. They discovered that the web is actually acting as a hyperacute acoustic sensor. Basically, it functions as a giant external eardrum, increasing the spider's sound-sensitive surface area to 10,000 times that of its own body. And the web was found to have better acoustic responsivity than all previously known eardrums in the animal kingdom. This allows these spiders to hear flying prey approaching long before it even arrives at the web. What gets even wilder is that the spider can adjust the tension on the radial threads of the web to both tune it to relevant frequencies like the wing beats of flying insects and to filter out irrelevant information like wind. Once again, we have this economy of design thing going on, where the spider is using its body and extensions of its body to filter information, making its brain more efficient, allowing it to do more with a lot fewer neurons. Now all of this, the division of labor of jumping spider eyes, their ability to discern biological motion, orb weavers using the web as an acoustic antenna, this is all about sensory input and behavioral output. Where in all of this is cognition happening, if indeed it is at all?
I tend to be very conservative about my definition. What I call cognition is all of the operation that the brain does, transforming sensory input into behavioral output. Okay. So it's what's in the middle. A reflex is something that goes directly from sensation, from the sensory processing to behavior. I touch fire, I retract my hand. That's a reflex. If there is an elaboration of the information that the sensory world gave to me, then that's cognition. Okay. Of course, this is a boring definition, of course, because now everything is cognition and every creature is cognitive. I can see the point already here. But when we go out of this definition, it's more about kind of the level of cognitive ability.
Right.
How many operations and how complex of operation are done between the sensory input and the output. Is the complex operations, is the problem solving, is the memory, is the spatial navigation and planning.
Right. Is there evidence of more complex function happening in spiders? Well, there's good evidence that they have a surprising capacity for memory. In 2015, Rafael Rodriguez and a team in Costa Rica studied a fascinating behavior seen in Nepheloclavipes, the golden orb web spider. These large spiders will often capture more than one prey insect and store it near the hub of their web in what scientists call a larder. So they put varying numbers and sizes of prey items into these spiders' webs and let the spiders wrap them, then gently chase the spiders back to their retreats at the edge of the web and quietly cut the prey items out of the web, then sat back and watched. Virtually all of the spiders returned to the hub, then started searching the web for their missing stuff. Interestingly, among the spiders that had been given only one prey item, the team found that doubling the mass of the prey made the spiders search 30 to 50% longer before giving up. But of the spiders that got more than one prey item, doubling the number of prey made the spiders search twice as long. So these spiders were remembering to some degree the general size of their larvae, and they have some idea how many things are supposed to be there. So this is not just memory, but what appears to be the beginnings of basic numerical ability, or what scientists call a sense of numerosity. Of course, we've looked at this with jumping spiders too. Fiona Cross and Robert Jackson ran an experiment with Portia, a genus of jumping spider which we think might be one of the cleverest. They constructed a little course like this, put a spider here, and showed it a scene with between 1 and 6 prey items in a little window it could only get to from this point here. The thing is, getting here required climbing up this tower, during which time the spider would lose sight of the window. While the spider was climbing, the sneaky scientist changed what was in the window. If the number of prey items was the same, even if the arrangement was different, the spiders just carried on like nothing was wrong. But if the spider saw only 1 prey item in the first viewing, but 3 in the second, or 5 in the first and only 2 in the second, then it spent way longer sitting here examining the scene before it moved forward. This is called expectancy violation, and Cross and Jackson found that if either one of the scenes presented to the spider contained either 1 or 2 prey items, and was a different number from the other scene, the spider pondered longer, because what it saw when it got here was not what it expected to see. If both scenes contained 3 or more, there was no delay. So this suggests that Portia can recognize 1 or 2 of something and have some kind of representation of that in its mind, with 3 or more just registering as many. Most of us can immediately recognize 5, maybe 6 dots without having to count them, but more than that just registers as several. This might be a similar cognitive mechanism. All of this leads us in a very particular direction, because memory, in its various forms, is the process by which we learn. And if spiders can remember things, then they can learn things too.
Sometimes we kind of see insects as these little machines that just act as small pre-programmed robots. But learning is actually something that is necessary for survival.
Right.
Animals that move need to learn things. They need to change their behavior depending on previous experience. The moment you leave more than a couple of hours, it's highly beneficial to be able to learn.
The relationship between memory and learning can be a bit tricky though. As humans, we have what's called episodic memory, where we can recollect a certain episode or experience in our lives. For instance, we may remember taking driving lessons and learning how to drive. But when we're actually driving, are we thinking about those lessons?
But while you drive, you are not recollecting the memory. You are just employing a modified circuit in your brain that works automatically. You're not thinking anymore about how you acquire that information. You acquire some modifications into your body structure, your brain structure, that then act automatically onto your new motor pattern.
I can't think of a way we could possibly determine whether spiders possess episodic memory, but they definitely seem to learn in a way that's probably not so different from us.
Oh, there's no doubt they learn. I mean, just like anything, even innate behaviors or behaviors that you can perform, to completion the first time you ever perform them, even innate behaviors get better with time. So that's actually learning, right? And jumping spiders, you can see, I mean, they're useless when they start. The first time they try to hunt, they're pretty useless. They get better at it with time, and the hungrier they get. So it's clear that they're learning throughout their lifetime.
This seems like a fairly straightforward example, though, of a fairly instinctual behavior that they're just getting better at. What about more complex behaviors that spiders might have to learn that they're likely not born with? Again, we look to our clever girl, Portia.
Different species of Portia attack different types of spiders. And Portia are specialists on eating spiders. But some Portia attack web spiders, and they will strum. They'll use their legs and their pelts to strum the the silk on the web to essentially lure the web spider toward them. And they've got to be really careful about that because they've got to lure the spider toward them slowly because if the web spider rushes out, then Portia's a goner. Because the web spider can kill Portia. So they've got to essentially, I don't know, anthropomorphizing it, pretend that it's a fly in the web that's not got a lot of energy. So the spider's just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to cruise on down and get this, you know, completely risk-free prey. And Portia will change her strumming depending on the velocity at which that web spider is coming down. And they learn. So once they've worked out that web spider responds really well to this particular plucking routine, they will use that plucking routine in future with actually only single trial learning.
It's pretty remarkable that Portia can learn different strumming routines and different tactics for hunting different kinds of spiders. Of course, that's very relevant to the spider's natural world, so perhaps it doesn't seem so surprising. But could they be made to learn something that would have no application in their natural environment? Put another way, can you train a spider? Well, you sort of can, but it's tricky. The only reward that really works with them is food, but it's tricky to use that as a persuader.
They don't need to eat a lot.
Right.
And so they are hardly motivated. Here we are getting into the same topic of if they fail, are they not capable or are they unbothered by our problem? But, you know, removed my experiments, it's pretty clear that this jumping spider can learn.
Some scientists have had some success with this. In Germany, Janis Liedtke and Jutta Schneider hid drops of sugar water, which spiders do like, believe it or not, behind little walls made of differently colored Lego bricks to see if they could learn which color was associated with the tasty snack. Not only were the spiders able to learn this fairly reliably, but when the researchers changed it up, the spiders learned the new color and location association fairly quickly.
Doing some color learning with Lego blocks.
I use Lego a lot in my videos.
Scientists love Lego.
It's great stuff. So it can be done, but they really do seem to learn things that are relevant to their lives a lot more quickly. And that might sound familiar to many parents out there who have heard their 12-year-old complain, "When am I ever gonna use this?" when it's math homework time, while that same 12-year-old can spit out Pokemon stats like they've written a thesis on the topic.
But there are predispositions, there are biases that are adaptive. I mean, you know, you can get train animals to associate two things, but they're much more readily associated if they're biologically relevant. So, you know, you might get 2 trial learning for something that's biologically relevant. It might be 15 trial learning if it's like something that's completely irrelevant and makes no sense, you know.
Again, we focused on jumping spiders in our research, but evidence of learning goes well beyond that. In 1962, S.M. Bayes did some experiments with Araneus diadematus, the cross orb weaver. He was able to teach them to associate a tasty prey item with a certain note from a tuning fork, and a bad tasting prey item with a different note. So, while jumping spiders may get all the recognition for their cleverness, other spiders have it too. We see fascinating examples of cognitive function when we examine how spiders move through their habitat. Some ground hunting spiders, like wolf spiders and huntsman spiders, are believed to largely use a phenomenon called path integration to navigate through their world. Rather than creating a cognitive map, sort of a picture or representation in your mind where things are in space, path integration is essentially keeping track of where you are relative to home base by estimating how far you've gone and in what direction, even if you're not going in a straight line.
Instead, path integration doesn't require a map to be formed. It just requires for you to hold a sense of the direction where home is, plus how far you are.
Right.
So it's just 2 numbers.
Okay.
Because the map is a matrix.
Right. Okay.
And so in terms of cognitive complexity, path integration is lower in complexity than a cognitive map.
Okay.
But if you ask me, it's higher in intelligence, if we can use the term, but it's more efficient. You know, we're going back to the same discourse as before, right? If you can solve the problem with a simpler process,
right,
it's fine.
Yeah.
it works, why having to go the extra mile if you don't have to?
Yeah. Some spiders use the polarization of light in the sky to determine what direction they're pointing. As for determining how far they've gone, there are two likely mechanisms. Proprioception, which is just being able to perceive the movements your own body is making, and optic flow, visually watching your immediate surroundings move past you and estimating how far you've gone. This is sort of like walking around in the woods with a compass and counting your own steps as you go, changing direction many times, then expecting to be able to walk in a straight line right back to where you started. This doesn't seem to be all that well understood in spiders yet. Some others use visual cues, but even that we don't fully understand. Leucorchestris arenicola is a wandering spider in the Namib Desert, and its environment is sand dunes. Not a lot of landmarks that really stand out in that environment, and yet, not only does this spider navigate visually, which we know because if you cover its eyes it gets hopelessly lost, it somehow does this at night, even on moonless nights, memorizing snapshots of the horizon. Impossibly, this spider also holds the record for the longest registered paths, regularly traveling over 100 meters in a night, with one record of the spider traveling 810 meters in a night, in an irregular loop and ending up right back at its burrow. That's about half a mile, making this species, known as the dancing white lady spider, the best known navigator of all spiders. Once again, jumping spiders capture our attention when it comes to spatial cognition. Going back for a moment to where we talked about memory, we could see in this experiment that Portia here held in her memory the fact that there was some prey in this window, and roughly how many. But if we look at the experimental setup here, we notice something else. The path the spider had to take to get to the prey involved two notable elements. One, at some point the spider has to lose sight of the prey. Two, the only available path to the prey actually involved the spider getting further away from it. This is called detouring, and it's actually the thing that made scientists first notice how clever jumping spiders are. For the clearest examples of this, they looked again to Portia, because unlike most other jumping spiders, Portia specializes in hunting other spiders, most of which would be more than capable of killing and eating Portia. And this requires approaching the prey from specific directions and angles, and that kind of planning is enabled specifically by sight.
Vision is immediate information, right? Speed of light. Doesn't get much more immediate than that. But it does allow you to assess things from a distance, so you don't have to get close enough to be able to touch it or whatever, so you can actually assess risk from a distance. So that allows you to plan, right? So that enables you to go, okay, well, I don't think I'm going to go that way. I'm going to go that way because that way, you know, I can, for example, use that plant to get around and approach from behind or something, which other sensory systems typically can't. I mean, I see it every day. In experiments, I see it every day. The spiders are looking this way and they're looking that way, and they're making a decision about which way to go. And that also has, it interacts with a habitat, right? I mean, if there's no, for example, if you're in a desert that's flat and there's nothing to hide behind, well, then there's no point in trying to assess any kind of different route or whatever approach to, for example, a potentially dangerous prey. And similarly, if it's really what I call cluttered, if it's like full forest, and you know you can only see 2 millimeters ahead of you because there's a leaf in front of you, well, that also doesn't allow for planning. But if you've got sort of intermediate levels, for example, of potential places to hide, I mean, think of lions that might be hunting, for example, they might use the habitat to hide, right? And jumping spiders do the same thing. Only do that if there A is something to hide behind, and B, they can see something at a distance because it's not completely cluttered, right?
I put a question to both Dr. Nelson and Dr. Diagro that I've wondered for a long time. Is there something special about vision, sight, that lends itself to higher intelligence or cognition that makes jumping spiders smarter than other kinds? Or do we just recognize intelligence more easily in creatures with good vision because it's closer to our own experience of the world? Do you think that they're as intelligent as they are because they have a highly developed visual system? Or do you think they might not actually be that much smarter than other spiders? We just recognize their intelligence more readily because it more closely resembles our own. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, do you think other spiders might actually be just intelligent in a lot of ways we don't recognize?
I definitely think that. I think there's no doubt that other spiders are intelligent in ways that we don't recognize, but I also think that there's something quite unique about jumping spiders, and that's because of its visual system.
Is it possible that other animals or other spiders that don't have these elaborate visual systems, might they also have almost equally advanced cognition, but we just don't see it for what it is because it's so wildly different from our own experience? Do you think that's a possibility, or do you think that that sense of vision does sort of lend itself to the evolution of a higher level of cognition?
I kind of think it's a bias in how we look at things. We tend to maximize our scientific efforts
Transfiguration
on these species that are highly visual. Not fully, not all of them, but it's not like we widely tested the cognitive abilities of black widows and we failed to find them, and then we had to go to jumping spiders. We didn't test other spider species or other spider families as extensive.
My will involves.
There could be something special about the vision, because vision is quite complex in itself. Because it's multi-dimensional. It's thousands of photoreceptors taking hundreds of readings per second. It's a complex sense, and it's a massive investment that then you have to make sense of. When you think about pheromones, for example, and sexual selection, you perceive a pheromone and you know there is a female. When you have to use vision, there is no one-to-one trigger.
Right.
So I think there's something fascinating about vision that requires some more computation. But we're also kind of biased in that. And I think that our best ability as humans is not seeing, it's communicating. And we can do that with our eyes. I can absolutely see a poorly visioned animal being very complex cognitively. Bats are quite of a good example.
Right.
Bats are heavily studied for their spatial navigation abilities. They live in a 3D world, which is very, very complicated. And we know that they perform amazing feats with their brain about locating sections. I'm not even talking about echolocation. So not about the senses. It's about understanding their place in space-time and how to reach other places, the planning part. So, I don't think that cognition is necessarily attached to vision. Okay. It's just that we recognize it the most.
While the eyes of jumping spiders have been best known for that keen vision, in 2022 those eyes gave us a glimpse of something remarkable. Dr. Daniela Rossler led a team that included Dr. Diagro, studying spiders as they appeared to be sleeping, suspended by a thread. When they observed this with spiderlings, which are somewhat transparent, they saw something we didn't expect. Regular intervals of high-speed retinal movement, which very closely resembled what our eyes do when we're in REM sleep, when we dream. Of course, this sparks interest and immediately gets our attention. Could jumping spiders be dreaming?
We kind of immediately knew it would have had kind of the interest. It could have sparked the interest it did. Because, the moment you go and touch that the topic, and I'm talking about hinting at the idea that there's dreaming. Mm-hmm. It's something that people love, right?
Yeah, people do love it.
People love it, but not just, I don't mean just the public, and scientists as well. Because it kind of challenges your presuppositions, and you see yourself in the animal. In the end, that's what moves the understanding of people of the internal worlds of animals. The moment you can relate. We knew that thing was relatable. Mm-hmm. Because moving your eyes is seeing in your sleep and it's dreaming. And you have, when you know that's going to happen, you have to be very careful. in what you want to say about what you observed. Because we didn't observe spiders dreaming, we observed spider moving their eyes while they were not moving their body.
It's possible that these tiny animals are much more like us than we thought. In the case of some spiders, it might be difficult to see anything relatable. But in these curious, big-eyed little hunters, it's not so much of a stretch to think that they might have an internal world that's something like ours. There's a balance to be struck in how we approach them, and we need to be careful not to anthropomorphize them too much.
And as scientists and researchers, we care about facts.
Right.
So the danger of anthropomorphizing in science is getting the facts wrong. And to me, that's important. You know, if we're talking about how we go about our daily lives, nothing will happen if we think wrongly about the spider's internal world. But for our understanding of the universe, putting our point of view into other animals will prevent us from understanding. Who knows the ramification of our understanding? Science is kind of mysterious in this sense. Who knows if in 400 years our understanding of spider dreaming wrongly will have prevented us to study the life-saving drug required to wake from the coma. I don't know. I'm making it up.
Right, yeah.
I'm completely making it up. But the moment you abandon truth, the scientific process breaks down. I think that the danger, if we can call it danger, is to our pursuit of reality, of truth and of facts.
At the same time, humanity has been making what is arguably the opposite mistake for hundreds or thousands of years.
Of course, there is also a danger in trying to treat them as different as possible. You know, the opposite preconception, it's equally dangerous to truth. If you put your brain into other animals and you anthropomorphize them, maybe you miss the reality. But also if you are completely resistant to the idea that they could have things in common with you, then you will also lose some important steps. And we kind of had that problem for a long time in the history of biology. And in the history of society in general, it's kind of how humans work, in which whatever looks different from me must be different from me.
These animals can baffle our expectations. Only 30 years ago, nobody believed they were anything more than little automated machines. Now, they appear to be quite a bit more than that. And with such rich diversity among spiders, with more than 50,000 species worldwide displaying wondrous variety in their forms and ecology, they may potentially have a great deal to teach us about how animals, and perhaps humans, make sense of the world around them. When I look across my little arachnery, I have to wonder what each one of these little spiders is perceiving, what choices I don't know they're making, what dreams they might be having. The more we learn about how spiders collect and process sensory information, the more we can develop new ways to test new hypotheses about their abilities. And I'm excited to see what the future may bring as we find new and novel ways to observe them and the ways their little minds might work.
The history of psychology is full of this kind of hard, complicated questions done on many different animals. And the breakthroughs are always when a scientist finds a way to speak the animal language, if you understand what I mean, right? It's
adventure time.
It's about finding the right experiment to let the animal shine, to show its abilities.
And that's what I've got for you today on spider cognition. Of course, a huge thank you to Dr. Nelson and Dr. Diagro for their time and expertise. If you liked this video or found it helpful, click that like button, which really helps me out. Subscribe for more spider goodness, and make sure you click the little bell so you're notified when I release new videos. And if you want to support this channel, check out my Patreon page, where you'll find extra content, behind-the-scenes stuff, research notes, and some of what goes into making these videos. Patreon is the very best way to support the channel, and a huge thank you to my Patreon supporters who have kept me going. I appreciate each and every one of you so much. This channel would not be possible without your support, and it means the world to me that it is something that's worth supporting to you. Thank you. And you can always head over to my Shopify store and pick up some channel merch there. The holidays are coming up, and these make a great gift for the elevator safety inspector or tax accountant or English teacher in your life. If you're a fan of the cheese test in my videos, these shirts may be for you. And all of that helps the channel as well. Of course, just watching and liking this video helps the channel, so if you've got this far, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've learned something about how spiders perceive their world, and I hope to see you next time. Cheers. So this is one more way in which the spider I finally fixed it. So this is one more way in which the jump...
This is an ohm. Now, don't let the eyes or its titanic size fool you. They're friendly. At least, as long as you leave them alone. Otherwise, they get a bit stampede-y. The ohm are one of many giant insects that rule the post-apocalyptic world of Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. The bugs took over after humans had some spirited disagreements and wrecked the Earth, marginally faster than we're currently wrecking it. Now, on this channel, we love to answer the important questions. Some recent ones include, can you knit milk? How fast can you cook a hot dog if you use thermite? And of course, can animal cells survive being grown in Gatorade? But today we come to you with possibly our most important question yet. How big can bugs get? And are the giant insects of the toxic jungle even remotely possible? Currently, bugs come in a few standard sizes. Microscopic, itty-bitty, just a little guy, oh dear God, what is that? And of course, Australian. But if we look back in the fossil record, they didn't stop there. The largest dragonfly got to be about cat-sized, and the largest millipede got to 8 feet or 2.5 meters long. These days, the only arthropods that get that big live in the ocean. Both lobsters, crabs, and some shrimp can get to pretty monstrous proportions. And while I'm definitely counting them as bugs, we just don't see the same massive proportions on land these days. Well, except for coconut crabs. As is tradition, for every rule in biology, there is at least one exception. But even then, it's weird that that's the biggest we've got. The largest true insect is a beetle, and it only gets to be about as large as your palm. So today, first we're going to answer the question why we don't find Shelob-sized spiders or ohm-sized beetles. But once we understand the lack of giant bugs, we're going to tell evolution to kick rocks and do our best to create our own monstrously sized bugs using a chemical cocktail we've been experimenting with. We spent the last 6 months growing our critters, and it's finally time to show them off. So let's dive in and understand why we don't find crocodile-sized millipedes in our modern swamps. The answer that was given when I was in high school you might have heard before. Most bugs don't have lungs, and instead breathe through special holes that run along the length of their body called spiracles. Bugs also don't have a circulatory system the way that we do with distinct veins and arteries. They're kind of more like a bag of blood, with a tube of open-ended heart in the middle acting as an impeller to keep it all mixed. So as long as some gas can exchange near the edges via the spiracles, it all gets mixed and they don't asphyxiate. The idea that is often presented is that because of this passive breathing, the extra oxygen during the age of giant bugs was what allowed them to get so large, and without that extra O2, they're physically limited. And while I'm sure that's a little true, this explanation doesn't actually hold up to literally any scrutiny. First of all, the spiracles are not just simple holes as they're often presented. They actually connect to a network of tubes and gas bladders, and as the insect moves, the squeezing and stretching of their bodies will actually draw quite a lot of gas in and through them, keeping them oxygenated. Further to this point, both spiders, scorpions, and their relatives also have what are called book lungs. They're modified from what were originally gills, but they work on the same basic concept as our lungs do. The book lungs are made out of layers of highly vascularized tissue that their version of blood, called hemolymph, is actively pumped through in the opposite direction that air flows. There aren't muscles to expand the layers like with our lungs, but the movement of their bodies and passive diffusion keeps fresh air moving through them. This way, there is way more surface area for oxygen to diffuse through. So, at a minimum, the makings of lungs were already there. Given time, there's no reason to say that proper lungs couldn't have evolved to compensate for an ever larger body, and lungs have evolved multiple times in Earth's history. But to address the oxygen content myth itself, while yes, the oxygen content was a bit higher than today, at about 35% compared to our current 20-ish, that's not that much more. And there was another period of tens of millions of years where the oxygen content got back up to about 30%, yet we don't see a return of giant insects. Instead, the answer is much simpler. There is a much more important feature of the world 300 million years ago when the age of giant insects was at its peak. There were no other animals on land. As the first animals to make it onto land, bugs enjoyed tens of millions of years being literally the only game in town, free to fill every size niche. But once our ancestors crawled out of the muck, everything changed. While it may have taken tetrapods a little while to get accustomed to being out of the water, they brought with them advantages that bugs just can't compete with. First, and probably most importantly, bones. The nice thing with bones is that you don't need to replace them every time you grow a little bigger. Instead, the soft, squishy bits can grow around a bone that itself just needs to get bigger. By far, the most dangerous point in a bug's life is during molting. During this process, bugs need to completely detach from the old exoskeleton, crack it open in the middle, and then shimmy their entire soft, squishy body out. The real problem, beyond this taking time, is that once they do get out, they're still soft and squishy. It takes hours for the new shell to start to form, and it's not fully hardened for potentially days. All the while, they have no defenses and are about as maximally edible as an animal can get. If we had to do this, it'd be like pooping out all of your bones once every few months or years, and then having to grow a whole new set repeatedly. Deeply unpleasant, and it would leave you very vulnerable. This process is also very wasteful. Each time they molt, the leftover shell has a lot of minerals and nutrients left in it that the bug is going to need to restock on. Even bony animals like deer or elk really struggle during horn growing season because of the intense nutrient drain. And that's just some head decoration. If you're replacing the equivalent to all of your bones regularly, you're going to be at a pretty serious disadvantage. And this is only made worse if you try and increase your amount of armor. Not only do you pack on extra mass, which can quickly restrict movement, you now shed even more mass every time you molt. At least when we put on clothing, we can reuse it. Imagine having to grow a new t-shirt and jeans every few days just to throw them out. That would be awful. But if you want an exoskeleton to show off your love of mad science, decorate your carapace with one of the amazing designs from our store. And since it's holiday season, we're having our biggest sale of the year. 20% off everything in store, be it t-shirt. So with an ever-growing population of dinosaurs and other giant reptiles, bugs started to have competition that they just couldn't win against. Even in the ocean, where bugs still get to be pretty big, they're still size limited. A lobster is technically immortal as far as anybody can tell, yet once they get past a certain size, the shedding process gets harder and harder. Eventually, what often kills them is that they fail to molt and are literally squeezed to death by their own growth inside their shell. So even under ideal conditions, the exoskeleton system is very limiting if you try and get too big, regardless of how you handle oxygen. And if we're talking about flying insects, they just can't compete with birds and bats. Birds are unbelievably efficient at air handling and can have huge talons and strong beaks that make any flying bug a target. They can also fly for days non-stop, and their much more advanced eyes and brains means that no bug is going to survive being huge and trying to share the air. So the logical and most energy efficient solution would be to go the other direction. Rather than trying to outgrow your predators and become too large to eat like a hippo, instead bugs needed to shrink in size. This makes for fast, nimble bodies that can much more easily evade predators, or small bodies that are easy to camouflage or fit into small nooks and crannies to hide. Throw in being able to breed faster than anything can eat your children, and what was beginning to look like a losing strategy suddenly becomes very successful. This is made easier because at small scales, bugs can get away with being as close to a minimum viable product that you're going to find in the animal kingdom. A fly, for example, starts its life as a wet noodle with 2 whole teeth to its name, and grows up to be an organism with a brain small enough to run on a laptop. But hot damn do they spread fast, making them very hard to get rid of. After all, the only rule of evolution is, to quote Astrid Lindberg, you can't fuck if you're dead. As such, we find relatively small bugs on land. The final bit of evidence for this is that while the Age of Giant Insects did have a few true giants, the vast majority in the fossil record were about the same size as insects today, even during periods of very high relative oxygen. And we do still have some today whose bodies get quite large, but as we've discussed, if literally anything else occupies the largest size niches, bugs get outcompeted. Now, it may seem a bit underwhelming to find that the reason bugs aren't bigger is because of evolution, but actually it's a good thing, at least for the sake of our mad science. It means that spiracles aren't actually the limiting factor, and theoretically we could have much larger bugs. So the world of Nausicaa is possible if we fuck up the planet in just the right way. But why wait for the apocalypse? What's the point of being a genetic engineer if I can't make monsters from time to time? So, how are we going to go about it? Well, first we need to understand how bugs actually control their size. You might think that the first thing we would try is adding more oxygen, but it turns out that that doesn't work. Other researchers have tried it multiple times, and while some bugs will get slightly larger, many actually get stressed out by the extra oxygen and end up smaller. Even highly robust bugs like cockroaches really don't like the extra oxygen, and this also lends more credence to what we talked about earlier. So if we want monster bugs, we need a different approach. Bugs, at least from a hormone perspective, work basically the exact opposite way that we do. We have a growth hormone that so long as the level is high, we get bigger. Bugs, on the other hand, have what's called juvenile hormone. As we've talked about, bugs constantly have to shed their exoskeleton as they grow, but most times that they shed, they go from one larval stage to a slightly larger larval stage, and this is controlled by keeping the levels of juvenile hormone high. When the level of juvenile hormone drops once they've hit max size, the next time they molt, instead of staying as a larva, they'll instead pupate. Pupation is how land bugs mature into adults. Unlike us, with puberty being a slow, drawn-out process, bugs get it all out of the way in one go. First forming a shell around themselves before basically turning into sludge on the inside and completely rebuilding their bodies into the adult form. I'll be honest, it sounds worse than acne in a cracked voice, so I'm pretty glad we don't do this either. In the ocean and in other arthropods that don't do pupation, there's more variation in how maturity happens. Some do it gradually with each molt, others will change dramatically between molts, just like pupating insects. But regardless, they still use the same hormone system and basic life cycle and body plan, which is also why I've been counting things like crabs as bugs. In principle, anything we learn from true insects is also applicable to the rest of the bugs. Anyway, the most obvious question then is, well, what happens if juvenile hormone levels never drop? Do the bugs just keep getting bigger? Or do they have some other way to monitor their size? Well, there's only one way to find out. We ordered a variety of different bugs to test on from a local reptile supply place. While my adorable pet noodle Linguini doesn't eat bugs, lots of other reptiles do, and so pet stores carry a variety of insects to keep them fed. We got silkworms, hornworms, mealworms, and flightless fruit flies, and since they can't fly, we've taken to calling them fruit walkers. Now, how can we control the level of juvenile hormone? Well, it just so happens that humans, clever little monkeys that they are, figured out that there's a whole family of chemicals called insect growth regulators. Some of these will trigger the same receptor as juvenile hormone, and in some countries they're used as a pesticide. If you overload the receptor, the insect just dies, and since no other animal uses juvenile hormone, it's pretty much harmless to them. If instead of just ramming them full of the stuff, if we dose their food with a tiny controlled amount, we should be able to find a sweet spot where they get stuck in a growth loop. At least, that's the hope. So let's drug some bugs.
Walter, what are you doing?
I'm dosing a caterpillar.
Dosing? As in LSD?
Well, it's a special blend.
I see. Hey, guess what just happened? Finding out that my father's giving drugs to bugs somehow just became a typical moment in my life.
It's wonderful, isn't it?
We bought a chemical called piproxafen, which is a juvenile hormone mimic. There were a few to pick from, but this one was the most potent and has the benefit of sounding like the kind of mad science chemical that would make bugs big. Anyway, we had to mix up food for each of the different bug types. The hornworms get hornworm chow, which is a horrible beige mush. The silkworms get silkworm chow, which is a horrible green mush. And the fruit walkers get fruit walker chow, which is again a beige mush that somehow smells both better and worse than the other various mushes. Finally, the mealworms get wheat germ, though they also need a source of water, so we're using these water crystals, which, as far as we can tell, are some sort of sodium polyacrylate, which is the same stuff they use to make Orbeez. We had initially experimented with supplementing some of their diet with fresh veggies, but we pretty quickly realized that this would mess with the amount of drugs that individual bugs were getting, so we switched to just dosing the chow or the water crystals in the case of the mealworms. Our first test is to see what concentration of drug the various bugs respond to. So we made multiple tests with increasing drug content, ranging from 2 milligrams all the way up to 60 milligrams. And it did not take long to see results. At the highest doses, the bugs just died. This was to be expected, after all this stuff is a pesticide. And at the lowest doses, there wasn't enough drug, as the bugs still pupated, many of which became healthy adults. But near the middle we hit gold. Around 15 milligrams per 50 grams of food was enough to almost completely inhibit pupation, and the bugs started to get big, though the response varied across species. The mealworms were by far the most resistant to the drug and the most responsive. They could handle very high concentrations, but even at low concentrations it was enough to stop them pupating. And from there, they just kept growing. So we'll come back to them in a minute. The two caterpillar species, the hornworms and silkworms, seem to handle the drug similarly. While they're dosed, the bugs will grow to what is basically the maximum normal size. But then they stop growing. And if they aren't allowed to pupate at that point, they get sick and then die. But if you switch out the food for undosed food, eventually the drug clears their system and they pupate and become adults. And can we just take a second to admire how ridiculously cute silkworm moths are? Just look at those big puppy eyes. Don't you just want a giant one to snuggle with? Anyway, the fruit walkers had a similar fate to the caterpillars. The drug will stop them becoming adults, but not pupating, interestingly enough. So the walls of the container get covered in pupa that all just die, which is kind of a bummer. I was really kind of hoping for a thumb-sized fruit fly, but we'll get there one day. So while this didn't produce giant insects in most of the bugs, it does show that if you raise these bugs, you can guarantee they get to max size every time by using this drug, which is neat, but not what we were going for. However, returning to the mealworms, they just kept getting bigger and bigger. Mealworms are a species of beetle, and unlike the caterpillars and flies, they don't have a set number of molts. The caterpillars will molt exactly 5 times every single time, whereas the beetle larva can molt anywhere between 12 and 20 odd times. And they'll pupate when conditions are most ideal rather than at a specific growth size. So while the caterpillars capped out, the larva just got huge. Here is a normal mealworm. But now here is our drugged one. What an absolute unit! And these fat boys would make for great lizard treats. There is a related species of beetle called a superworm that normally looks huge compared to a mealworm, but compared to our monsters, there's almost no difference. That said, since we had some superworms for doing this comparison, we decided to try drugging them too, and again we had great results. They got noticeably bigger, but also interestingly their shells became much darker, which looks cool, but also look how freaking huge they are! One of the reasons we started this project was because you can actually already buy what are called giant mealworms. Here's some that we bought, and they're made the same way that we showed, by drugging the bugs. On average, the store-bought giants were ever so slightly smaller than ours, but we did find the occasional huge big boy in that batch. So at least our results are pretty consistent with theirs. Once these have reached this giant size, if you stop feeding them the drug, they still do go on to pupate and form healthy adults, which is nice to see. But we were not satisfied to stop there. What was apparent was that even though juvenile hormone prevents pupation and does allow for some extra molts in certain insects, there is some sort of extra internal timer that is counting directly the number of molts, and acts as a secondary inhibitor of growth. This means that there's a second circuit that we need to unlock if we want to achieve further growth. So let's quickly return to talking about how molting works. While juvenile hormone controls if pupation happens, there's another hormone called ecdysone that controls when each molt happens. Both of these hormones are released by special neurons in the bug's brain, and where juvenile hormone comes as a fairly static level until it drops off, ecdysone comes in sharp pulses. When a pulse comes, it triggers the molt, and so long as juvenile hormone is high, that molt will end as a new, larger larva. Our hope was that if we provide just enough ecdysone at the same time as the juvenile hormone, we might be able to exceed the limit. We got the idea from a paper that showed that applying ecdysone to hornworms right after their 5th molt while juvenile hormone levels are high trigger a 6th molt and much larger larva than usual. But where do we get ecdysone? Well, it turns out the answer comes from none other than Popeye the Sailor Man. You see, plants, while they may not be great conversationalists, are very clever. Many plants have evolved to produce what are called phytoecdysone, which really just means they figured out how to produce ecdysone. This way, any bug that eats that plant gets swamped with molting hormone, triggering a bad molt that kills them. And wouldn't you know, one of the most potent sources of phytoecdysone is spinach. And while humans don't have an ecdysone receptor, ecdysone does interact with a different receptor that we have called estrogen receptor beta. Now, it's tempting to assume that because estrogen is involved that it's something to do with the sex hormone. But no, it actually isn't a sex-related gene at all. Instead, it actually controls muscle growth, and stimulating the receptor can induce muscle hypertrophy. As such, you can buy pills pre-filled with ecdysone online, and bodybuilders take them to help them get swole, which does technically mean that Popeye was onto something. Anyway, we had hoped that by adding ecdysone directly to the feed, we could get lucky and hit another sweet spot that fully unlocks the growth. And at first, it seemed like it might be working, but then tragedy. The hornworms all died. Both the highest and lowest concentration had killed them pretty quickly, leaving only the middle concentration to survive the longest, but even they didn't survive long. The mealworms fared a little better, but we started to notice more and more of them dying, and after a few weeks of treatment, when we weighed them, we actually saw that increasing ecdysone only led to a loss of weight, not gain. So if we want bigger, we're going to need a different approach. Feeding them the ecdysone directly is just too blunt of an instrument to interface with the delicate bug circuitry. Either we somehow need to control more carefully the feeding schedule, or a completely different delivery mechanism than food. We're thinking maybe a timed aerosol or something like that. But all of this was only ever a proof of concept. To make Mothra, we shouldn't be relying on this blunt tool and should really be going in and directly tinkering with the DNA. Either by giving us optical control of the release of the hormones so we can trigger it by just applying the correct color of light, or adjusting the timing and sensing circuits directly. Unfortunately, that'll have to be for a future video, but I'm still thrilled at how chonktacular we managed to get the beetles. I suspect this method would work with Hercules beetles, which are the world's largest, so we might get a few larvae to see if we can make a world record sized bug in the future. And I'd be very keen to try this on crustaceans. It might even be worth redoing the experiment with some isopods or crabs. Now, most of my world domination schemes require growing giant insects or finishing our meat robot. You know, maybe a death ray on the moon, or sharks with friggin' lasers.
After over 20 years of service, the WWE GOAT himself, John Cena, has retired. The man is absolutely a national treasure, known for his long-running contributions to the Make-A-Wish Foundation and his incredible work as one of the most, if not the most, popular wrestlers of all time. Not to mention his many contributions to meme culture that have become iconic digital entries on the internet, from the moment he pulled a heel turn to dancing with headphones on, to the Bing Chilling incident, to asking, "Are you sure about that?"
Are you sure about that?
To the "You can't see me" bit, to his iconic wrestling intro, and many more. The man is the living embodiment of entertainer, and it's no wonder he has accumulated endless fans during his storied career. And we can't forget the fact that John Cena is now an incredible actor who has flourished under the careful hand of James Gunn, as his character Peacemaker is genuinely one of the funniest anti-heroes the world has seen in years. His mere presence as this character has led to thousands of memes too, given how funny the show is and his commitment to the bit. It's not every day that a celebrity becomes so beloved over the course of their career, whilst managing to remain deeply integrated with their meme culture, as the shitposters seem to love John Cena. He's simply a natural performer that isn't afraid to not take himself seriously, which is a rare trait in an era where it seems everyone in the entertainment industry wants to be the best of the best. As a result of his charisma, Cena has managed to achieve something special. He's retained relevance across 2 decades, as he's adaptable and good-natured enough to understand how he needs to evolve and change as a person to achieve his goals. This is why the news of his retirement from wrestling has become such a big deal. To witness a man who has been so deeply involved within the medium of meme culture find his peace is wonderful, as the resulting clips and edits from his final fight exhibits how much of an impact John Cena has had on generations of people. In short, John Cena's retirement has led to a torrential flood of memes once again, as he consistently plays his role as one of the world's most famous entertainers with a heart, drawing love and respect from his fans for over 20 years and inspiring countless shitposts along the way. What meme would you guys like me to give a lesson in next? Let me know in the comments below.
Subscribe!
Recently, I was watching GlaveKeel's apology video when I noticed something really weird. The way he was talking sounded way too familiar,
Might get a few larvae to see if we can make a world record
before. It sounded way too close to someone we all have inside our phones, and if you haven't guessed it by now, I'm talking about ChatGPT. The entire script for his apology video was generated by AI. In fact, he's using an AI-generated script for almost every single video. And since I know it might be hard to believe for some people, I'm gonna show all the evidence and explain exactly how I can prove this. Alright, first of all, let me tell you guys exactly what it was about his video that made me realize he's 100% using AI. Now, I don't really watch GlaveKeel, but I was watching a reaction from Sane to a video from Glaive titled Wuthering Waves Just Soft Rebooted Itself. Now, that title in itself is already pretty weird, but that aside, all it takes is just the first minute of this video to realize it's 100% AI. He's using the exact same phrasing 3 times within the first minute of this video.
There were no kits, no animations, not even a blurry screenshot. We watched the 2.8 developer livestream hoping for a teaser, a roadmap, or just a little hint of what we will get.
You know, I started all this to talk about video games, but that's not really today's story, because Netflix are about to own the Nemesis system, along with the rest of WB Games. It's another tech giant trying to swallow up
Come on.
Have you ever wondered what your life would be like if you were born 150 years ago, or even more, with a different society, different friends, different parents? What would your life have been like if you were born in, say, Victorian London, for example, or ancient Egypt? Well, I've constructed an immersive visual to show you exactly what that would be like. That's right, it's a trick question. If you weren't conceived exactly when you actually were, then you simply wouldn't exist. I mean, sure, your parents could have conceived a child 2 months later than they did, but that child wouldn't be you, because you are a specific sperm and egg cell combination. If your parents had waited even a short amount of time, it's not that you would have been born later, it's that someone else would have been conceived in your place. And of course, if your parents never met, it's not that you'd have different parents. You just wouldn't exist at all, and somebody else would instead. We can call this the time dependence claim. If any particular person had not been conceived when he was in fact conceived, it is in fact true that he would never have existed. And this simple observation is the starting point for a philosophical problem. First described in 1984 by legendary philosopher Derek Parfit, the problem he relates in his book Reasons and Persons is one of the most important contributions to moral philosophy in the past 100 years, and it's called the non-identity problem. Imagine you meet a pregnant woman, looking forward to giving birth to her first child. But this woman is also incredibly vain. She loves attention and would do almost anything to get it from people. And she's had a realization. She realized that if she has a disabled child who lives his life in a wheelchair, she'll get loads of attention and sympathy from strangers and friends. So she takes a pill, which she bought on the black market, which intentionally disables the fetus growing inside her. Now, because she takes this pill, when that child is born, he'll spend the rest of his entire life in a wheelchair. And she does this, disables her own child, because she wants attention. Has this woman done something wrong? This one isn't a trick. Most people say that she's obviously done something horrible and seriously wronged her child. When that child grows up and finds out that his mother took this pill, he'll rightfully be furious and wish that she hadn't done that. Now, he'll still have a life that's worth living overall, he'll still be relatively happy, but his quality of life will be lower than it would have been. And so, quite trivially, we therefore say that the mother has harmed her child, and that's why it's wrong. Okay, that's easy enough, but now consider a different scenario. Imagine you meet a woman who isn't pregnant, but wants to conceive a child. But she also has a rare medical condition. Doctors tell her that if she conceives a child right now, that child will be born with a disability and spend his entire life in a wheelchair. There's no cure for this condition, but fortunately, the condition is only temporary and it always goes away completely after 1 month. So if she conceives a child right now, he'll be disabled. But if she waits just 1 month to conceive a child, then that child will be born completely able-bodied. But this woman also loves attention, and she knows she'll get a lot of it if she has a disabled child. So she intentionally conceives a child as soon as possible while the condition is active, rather than waiting, in order to make sure that her child will be disabled. She's successful and eventually gives birth to a child who will now spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Has this woman done anything wrong? Most people say yes, she obviously should have waited to conceive a child. It's the same as with the first mother. Intentionally having a disabled child when she could have avoided this means that she's seriously wronged her child. But has she? Think about it. In this circumstance, the decision was about when to conceive a child, not to harm a child that's already growing. So, yes, her child will be born disabled, but remember, if the mother had waited to conceive, it's not that that child would have been born able-bodied, it's just that another, different, able-bodied child would have been born instead. So these two situations aren't the same. We could take both of those children, and when they grow up, we could tell them what their mothers did, and ask them, if you could go back in time and change her decision, would you do it? The first child would say, of course I would change her decision. If she hadn't taken that pill, I'd be able-bodied. But the second child would say, well, of course I wouldn't change her decision, because if she waited a month to conceive instead, I never would have existed, and I'm glad that I'm alive. So in the first case, the mother has clearly wronged her child. But in the second case, if anything, she's kind of done her child a favor, because due to her decision, that child now gets to exist and have a life that's worth living. But the weird thing is that despite literally understanding this difference, many people's intuitions just scream at them that both of these parents have acted wrongly. But in that second case, who has been wronged? It seems natural to say that if something is bad, it has to be bad for someone. But it's not bad for the child, since he's glad to exist, and the mother's perfectly happy too. So why is what she did wrong? Well, okay, maybe the person who was wronged is that other child who would have existed if the mother chose differently.
Don't worry.
Except you can't really wrong people who don't exist. Like, if it's possible to harm potential people by not conceiving them, then given how many possible human beings we could potentially create all the time, if we're not constantly engaged in proactively having children, then we're constantly engaged in harming a bunch of potential children. And that just doesn't seem right to most people. So we have a case here where something seems obviously immoral, but we can't identify anyone who's actually worse off because of it. And in fact, the child involved actually seems to be better off, and like he should be glad of the decision made. Cases like these are what Derek Parfit described in the 80s. Cases where in order to avoid some negative outcome for a person, a different non-identical person would have to exist instead. And that's why he called this the non-identity problem. And the reason it's a problem is because we now have to justify why, despite everything I've just said, we still think that these kinds of cases are, like, definitely unethical. Because yes, who you are as a person is determined by your specific genetic makeup. I actually found out my own genetic makeup last year when I did a DNA test with today's sponsor, MyHeritage. After all, you might be thinking, yeah, this is kind of philosophically interesting, but conditions like the one I've just described don't really exist, and this has no practical effect in the real world. But not so fast. Have you ever heard of in vitro fertilization, or IVF? For people who are struggling to conceive a child, IVF is a method sometimes used in which egg cells are removed from a woman's ovaries and fertilized with sperm in a petri dish in a laboratory. After a few days, one of the resulting embryos can be taken from the petri dish and implanted into a woman's uterus in the hopes of starting a pregnancy. Now, because there are typically multiple embryos created with IVF, and only one of them eventually gets implanted, we can actually genetically test each embryo and choose whichever one we prefer. This has caused some ethical debate, with some people thinking it kind of resembles eugenics. We can, after all, genetically test these embryos, identify disabilities and diseases, and then choose a different embryo. And some people think that this is immoral. But what if someone wants to have a disabled child? That might sound strange, but it does actually happen. Take a look at this study, noted by David Boonin.
Only autist, maybe. Alright, well, I did what I wanted to do. And apparently the Zone Zero has been turned off for quite some time. Oh well, unfortunate. But I didn't do much here anyway. So that's going to be it for this stream. Good luck, fun, thanks for watching.